Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable Justice Ali Baga Najmi, Honorable Justice Noir, uh, Justice, other visiting guests, ladies and gentlemen, foreign guests also. Uh, it's a pleasure to speak here. But before I say something, I must congratulate Pakistan on its 75th anniversary. And to look good in the world, and one of the only countries in the world which has the application of international law into its domestic law. With the help of the executive in the last 65 years, in the last 10 years, the journey is through the courts. The basic point today to discuss the concept of human rights and next piece and how they have been transformed into the Pakistani legal system for a common man. I must confess that as a teacher of international law, Pakistan has a dualistic theory and not like monistic theory that any international law, treaty, conventions, protocols signed by Pakistan, then ratified by Pakistan, exceeded by Pakistan, has been incorporated into a domestic law. The federal government has 12,455 acts and ordinances. Provincial government, Punjab government, whom I represent, has more than 25,000 laws, acts and ordinances. If you examine as an international theorist, if you look at anthropology, the anatomy and the pathology of the Pakistani law by examining how good do we look, I must confess 35% laws are the output of the international conventions and treaties. As a part of the judiciary, I must say that I represent, when we travel abroad, I'm speaking every month abroad. When we say you are from, I say I represent the Punjab judiciary, which is out of 220 million people in Pakistan, we represent 110 million people, 42 districts. Right now in Rawalpindi bench, which is also 12 million people of 5 districts. What we have done, I'll show you that some countries, when they look at the legal theorist and international legal theorists, they look at the political standard, look at the law. What we have done successfully is how law has been made by the intervention of the courts. Something new, when I started doing that, I thought I was wrong. But and I examined the international law, then I found out in the social, economic, and cultural issues, courts have intervened. When India was coming out of socialism to capitalism, the Supreme Court intervened when there was no law. Canada mining issue, the West world came and rescued the governments to make the law. And 7 laws I've made, I don't want to be blamed, is all on social justice. Aman Pasota is sitting here. First time he brought the case of Sube Khan, where we saw Sahar Bandial, who is going to speak tomorrow. We looked into the domestic workers law. No domestic worker has a right to work. We got that law developed, enacted by the government. Then I realized that I was wrong. No, I was not wrong. I asked the government to sit down. When you look at the federal government part 1, the legislative part, and look at the federal rules of business, provincial rules of business, you have the mandate for every department has the mandate and the rule of business to make the policy and the legislation. And the High Court, under the constitutional jurisdiction of writ of mandamus, can direct a person to do what they're required by law to do. And those exercises I've done only to give justice, like Sana Khushi, who's sitting here, who was not happy when she came. And now she's happy. Second time when she came. I just recently wanted to say, 5 days ago, I passed a judgment on developing the KOSAR Development Authority in protecting the Murray and all the hilly areas because of the massive floods which came out. Judgment is been loaded as Pervez Abbasi. In that judgment, I had to say that this is the 8th law we are asking the government to make, and that a story I told, which I want to say since I was sitting here and hearing good news and bad news. In the Supreme Court conference 3 weeks ago, I said I want to say good, good, and good. And when I say good, in a good, I can find out the concept which is driven by England. I applied in the last week's judgment uploaded, is creates egg. Create egg is a terminology when you see something good, something bad. Create egg is an English policy where in English common law they say, whereas in 1995, a lord came to an inn and said, "Can I have an egg, please?" He was served a bad egg. How was the egg, my lord? Oh, some part was good and some part was bad. Somebody I heard say, I look at the half glass full, half glass empty. I say, I'll go positive thing for Pakistan. First, what rights do we have? I am a judge of a country where in some buildings still there is written, blacks and dogs are not allowed. The Gandhi movement started in the subcontinent when he was traveling first class in South Africa. He was stopped by a person and he said, "What are you doing? You're black." I called to the bar of Middle Temple. "You cannot throw me out." He said, "No, you are black, go away." The issue is rights. Rights, UN people are sitting here, they're rights, they've got civil and political rights. Constitution of Pakistan, we're lucky because after the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, we had the first fundamental rights in the 56 Constitution, then 62 Constitution, which was not given first, then amended in 56 Constitution. 73 Constitution was the best Constitution, has all the rights, which I can show you all. This is the fundamental rights given to us. But those rights, when you look at it to the Islamic concept, are the translation of the Hazur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam last prophet's sermon, 632 AD. We look at the petition of rights, this rights, and the United Nations Convention, Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, United Nations Covenant on Economic and Social Rights, all those rights, Pakistan has them in the Constitution. The first answer I give to the world is we have these rights in the Constitution. These rights are given every day by the courts in Pakistan. These are the fundamental rights given to them because the Constitution itself starts with the word, whereas the sovereignty of these universe belongs to Almighty Allah alone and its sacred trust. That Constitution has parts, and part 2 of the Constitution, chapter 1, talks about fundamental rights, and part 2 of chapter 2 of part 1, 2 deals with the principles of policies, which are called economic and social rights. But when I became a judge, after 6 years, I thought, why can't we give economic and social rights to the public? Then in Ahmed Pansota case, PLD 2020, Lahore 229, when he brought the case of food, wastage of food with Iman Bandial, I had to declare that although principles of policy under part 2, starting from Article 30, Article 37 onwards, can, if they're read with the fundamental rights, which are the fundamental rights, they are called the explanation of fundamental rights. That's why we always talked about economic and social rights, right to food, right to shelter, right to medical, right to education, and lots of judgments have been coming by our courts every day. But to say the most important thing, whether Pakistan Constitution itself has the fundamental rights, the courts are giving the fundamental rights, the courts are being proactive in the fundamental rights, there is a judicial activism which gave these fundamental rights in summative powers or the regional jurisdiction of the High Court, which has been given those rights. Then second part would be, next please, how those rights have come into the domestic law. As you all know, when 20 years ago when I was a young lawyer, the European Union, GSP Plus, we had to write a report to show the world whether Pakistan has signed, and after signing the international covenants, what steps have we taken? It took me 2 months to write that report, and I remember they are bothered about labor issues first, they are concerned about the most important issue, environment issues, they are concerned about human rights issues, they are concerned about their various international covenants by various organs of the United Nations. And all mostly on green rights, United Nations, I must say, we have the Climate Change Act 2017, we have the Environmental Protection Act 1997, we have the schedule of the laws in Pakistan. The beauty of Pakistani laws are, the draftsmen who are drafting the law is, whenever we incorporate international law into our law, we always have a schedule in the law as per the international law. Because the Pakistani constitution itself recognizes the international treaties and reference and implementation of that as per Federalist Part 1, Clause 3 of the Constitution. All international law and international treaties will be implemented through the law. An example would be New York Convention of Arbitration Law, Recognition and Enforcement of Arbitral Award. Schedule 1 is the treaty. Environmental Protection Act, Schedule is the treaty. All human rights, labor issues, child labor, human trafficking, all laws Pakistan is making, anti-terrorism laws, money laundering laws, mostly laws you question, why do we have these laws? A young man sitting here say, sir, why do we have these laws coming in? Your country is signing documents. This country is sometimes acceding to documents. When you miss the signing part, you can go straight to accession to international law under the Vienna Convention, and you say, I have to bring the law because there's a mandate of international law. International law under the Vienna Convention 1966 mandates the states which are under the public international law, strictly speaking, they say there's a mandatory articles of the treaty, which is called the conventions, protocols, agreements, charters, declarations. Some international law are hard law and some international law are soft law. And hard law, international law, you have to make the mandatory requirement to make the domestic law through the parliament by filing in and the instrument to the parliament says we need to file this law. And the laws are in every field. For example, when we're looking into the first time when I had to think whether we have a right definition in our constitution, I remember what I was learned in England. Right is an interest, recognized and protected. Then I had to write this in the Subeh Khan judgment that right is a power, privilege, faculty, which right can be moral or legal right, and these are interests recognized and protected by rulers. So my country, Pakistan, recognizes these rights. Pakistan protects these rights. The state protects his right because state is under obligation to protect you, and you are under obligation to obey the state. Two beautiful articles for the Constitution. For a foreign guest, I will say Article 4 of the Constitution. It finishes everything. It says to enjoy the protection of law. Nowhere else in the world, when I go abroad and say, you don't have this provision, my Constitution has this provision. To enjoy the protection of law, comma, it's an inalienable right to be dealt by law and no action determinative to your life, liberty, body, even liberty, body, and property be taken except as per law. This is the most beautiful carved article. Everyone has it. But there is also give and take. Article 5 of the Constitution. Obedience to the Constitution, loyalty to state. It's inviolable obligation of every citizen to be treated as per law and to obey the Constitution and obey the law. Then we bring out the rights definition into our domestic law, and then we had Sheikh Asim Farooq, Justice Anwar was a lawyer the lawyer at that time who argued the case before us that whether we can have the forest in the urban area, and we had to declare if we're looking at international treaties Pakistan has signed, because Shala Zia Wabda, PLD 1994, Supreme Court 693, first time Supreme Court declared in the Constitutional Court judgment that the principles of the Rio and the principles of Stockholm, those soft law, but those principles, if are held in the Supreme Court judgments, becomes a hard law. And then somebody asked me a question, how do you bring a soft law into a hard law? My question is, Shala Zia Wabda, they brought the principles of Rio Declaration, the principles of Stockholm Conference in 1972, which says PPP, precautionary principles. The precautionary principles were a soft law. When Supreme Court held that precautionary principles by expanding Article 9 of the Constitution, which only says right to life, unlike Indian Constitution, right to environment, unlike other constitutions in the world, out of 195 states, 4 states, and Pakistan, one of the states which doesn't have a right to environment, but we don't need it because Supreme Court of Pakistan, PLD 94, Supreme Court 694, has held right to life means right to a healthy environment free from pollution. The principle was the soft law coming to the hard law. And when it's coming to the hard law, it became the principle when you look at the judgment, the scientifically political scientist looks at the judgment as ratio descendi, opter dicta, state decisis. And the Constitution of Pakistan also has a unique form to say that the foreign guest can write and say, international law is applied to Pakistan by two state organs, one by the parliament under Article 70 by making the law, federal or provincial, second by the governor or president, federal or provincial. International law is applied through a law. But on the other hand, a bigger side is Article 189 of the Constitution. It says if a Supreme Court enunciates a principle of law, decides a question of law, comma, it shall be binding on courts below. And the judgments which I give, all these judgments which I was passing them, I was driving my force of a power I had under Article 201. It says, subject to 189, a High Court judgment enunciating the principles of law is binding on all the courts below. And that was where we came to rights to forest, which Justice Anwar repaired, right to domestic worker, right to movement of motorway, where I developed a concept of cultural rights. You have UNESCO Conference 1972, Paris. Pakistan got the Antiquities Act 1975 to preserve the culture heritage as a part of the country's own heritage. And that heritage we couldn't examine when the case came to me for opening the motorway of Multan, and I looked at Article 26 of the Constitution. It says every citizen has a right to a public entertainment and resort. Public entertainment, I need to have cinemas, whatever. That doctrine I restricted in the Pindi judgment, PLD 2022, Lahore 148, in the Food Street case. A lawyer filed a case to stop Food Street at the cantonment in Rawalpindi. And I said, no, because of Corona, you cannot stop one road because of there's business activity going on. For Article 15 itself says, person can move freely throughout Pakistan subject to restriction. The restriction was that we can restrict your restriction because of the economic factors, because of judicial restraint. Then right to a person with different abilities, Sana Khurshid case, when they brought the case before, I said, you came for ramp and I'm giving you a law. And that was taught at Harvard and in Stanford. And here I had to be a bit bold. I wrote with my tears, I said, justice, if you can't walk to justice, justice will walk to you. And I wrote this quotation in that judgment, and that is quoted all over the world. If you can't walk to justice, comma, justice will walk to you. What is justice? Justice drives the word at Article 175 of the Constitution. Justice starts word under rule of law, access to justice. Justice Najfi and others was mentioning whether you approach, or Haris was saying, can you approach the courts? I made sure when Sana used to come into my court, I made sure the lifts were working at that time. And I made sure that they will all be treated equally to have access everywhere. If they can't have access to court, they will not have access anywhere else. First thing, they went to LDA, doors were open to them. They went to DHA, doors were open to them. Wherever they were going, because there was court behind it. I took a risk. I was going aboard, but glad things were all in our favor. And that was the term which I used with Sana's judgment. I had to be a bit emotional to write the quotation of the US senator who wrote, do not pity on me. I own this wheelchair. I sit on this wheelchair. I run faster than you do. Okay, Tammy Tucker, Senator US. As you know, world, because the conference on the environment, one of the Israeli Minister for Environment did not attend the meeting, and she left one country. I would not mention countries because they had no facilities for her. People say, if you invite us, take care of us. That's the court's duty and the executive's duty. Then, another case of right to education, where we had to talk about Article 25, children to have education in Pakistan. 25A, every citizen, state shall give rights to this. Next, please. Then I only have 4 or 5 minutes because of... Then next. Then, because I don't have time, you can use it later, there's how international laws transform into a law, bonded labor. Bonded labor issue, how bonded labor international treaties. Pakistan has even when you look at Pakistan looks good. Because when you look at the international compliance of Pakistan, most of the treaties Pakistan has ratified. Sometimes date of signing, sometimes date of rectification, and then most of the treaties Pakistan acceded to straight away. Sometimes when you miss signing, you go away to, because we got very lucky. Then I once asked, when I was in Supreme Court as a additional AG like Qasim Chauhan, who's sitting here, every case used to come to us because of the 18th Amendment. And I said, why this is coming to us? Then I look at 3 A's in the Constitution. 19A, 25A, and 10A, right to a fair trial and due process of law. Every citizen has a fundamental right for fair trial. And I wonder why it is. Then we found out Pakistan repeatedly acceded to the international United Nations Covenant to Civil and Political Rights. And we are bounding on Pakistan to incorporate it into the Constitution. That's why we are saying to United Nations that why can't we have environmental right into the Constitution by saying 9A? But the answer is, when the Supreme Court judgment is so clear, we don't need to amend the Constitution. We look at because our law is sovereign binding effect of the Supreme Court judgments. Because this only country where the Constitution itself recognizes the judgments, importance of the judgments of the courts by implying into the domestic law. And that is how the importance are. Nowhere else in the world you can see a judgment having the force of sovereign law. What is law when you look at 300 years ago, Jeremy Bentham and John Austin? Law is the command of sovereign, enforced by sanction. We say law is the command of the courts enforced by contempt. Article 204 can punish a person if you don't disobey the law. That is what the rule of law is. Next, please. These are Pakistani ratification, and they made the laws. And there we made laws because of the Masih case by the Supreme Court of Pakistan. Pakistan went into the public interest litigation by Justice Zullah and all. There we came out with all these concepts and Darshan Masih cases, and all Supreme Court intervened. And all these things which I am doing is because I look up to Supreme Court of Pakistan. In every case, even Sana Khurshid case, I cited Supreme Court Judge Solanki case of Justice Jawad Hassan Saab judgment, where Justice Jawad Hassan itself expanded the word to this issue. Wherever we do, we look at the Supreme Court, and there is Supreme Court strength, we take the strength more. Because we are all subject to Supreme Court's own making power. Then next, please. The impotence of United Nations. And then we had the laws of ILO, because as you look at it, United Nations, UN has 5 basic organs, and then Economic and Social Council has various agencies. All the agencies, United Nations, have the link in Pakistan, and laws are there from ILO to IMO to FAO to UNEP to UNECTO, all these. So we have laws with the UN agencies. Treaty signing, Pakistan always goes and signs, and before we end, Pakistan is even now looking much better in the climate change COP27 in Egypt. Prime Minister is the vice chair with the head of with the Norway Prime Minister chairing a meeting of COP members of the party next week. This is how Pakistan looks better, because we are actively involved in international law, and we want to look better because we have to comply with all the international requirements. FAFT, GSP Plus. GSP Plus is coming in again. We'll see these are the international laws we have complied with. And now we can add after this talk that sometime executive did and little part judiciary did. Judiciary made sure that where the executive lacked, judiciary jumped. Where the executive was not complying, judiciary came in. The judiciary role is, or judiciary is that the judiciary is the pillar of the state. Why judiciary comes in? If they don't take action, we can come in because we have the most powerful Article 199 of the Constitution, where subject to the Constitution, where there's no effective remedy available, and any party can come. You don't need to be a national Pakistan. Person is for fundamental rights. Individual is a citizen of Pakistan. But the Article 199, the beauty of the Constitution is one of the most well-drafted Constitution. It says any party. It doesn't restrict to a person. It doesn't restrict to a citizen. It doesn't restrict to an individual. It restricts to a party. That's what the UK Supreme Court expanded. Lord Denning expanded the jurisdiction of locus standi and aggrieved by the English case law. And how Antonio Scalia in the US went to doctrine of textualism, originalist doctrine, the constitutionalism, the originalist approach by the Americans say, I am a very orthodox judge. I will always confine myself into original words of the Constitution. You cannot, the Constitution you cannot interpret. Lord Sumption, one of the best judges in UK who just retired, who was made a judge of the UK Supreme Court straight away, and after that he retired. He recently wrote a book, Trials of the State. And he mentioned that judges are meant to interpret law. Surprisingly, they're making it. Interpretation of law is something required from the judiciary. And we have interpreted Article 9 and all these articles. And issue is the approach in the world today, how you look good is the judiciary plays a part with the good work of executive. Executives are doing good work. We always commend them in every way. In Sana Khurshid case, in Ahmed Pasoda just informed me, if we can explain to you, if I give him a minute, that the law we made, he just found out today as we speak that he got the regulations made by the government too on right to wastage of food. Even the things we are doing for Pakistan are looking, because we are doing just for the common man. Last. They are all international treaties Pakistan is signed to, even labor union, and they have laws in place. Next. Freedom of association. Our constitution allows us for making child labor. We have these child labor, all articles for associations, all articles linking. Next, please. Then the access to education. Most important is Article 25 and also the Article 14 of the dignity of home. And then these are fundamental rights, Commission of Child Welfare. And next, please. And also, all this proactive work was mostly done by Justice Masoodi Shah, who came out into the child labor, to environment, to domestic worker. And most of the work which I got to do is, which when he was elevated, something was there. So I had to do it because it's our duty to do. The cases which are taken up in the court, we have to do it because you can only make a difference if you do something for a common man. And these cases are pro bono cases. These cases are nobody else's cases. These cases are the ones which give you respect in the society to help a person like Sana, that if you can't walk to me, I'll walk to you. Inshallah, Pakistan is there. Pakistan, Zindabad. Thank you.